recording now. Recording. All right. So, we last left off at. Actually, hold on just one second. Actually, do I need to do that? I don't need to do it. Never mind. I'm not going to do that. Okay. Ugh. I can always get this. There we go. Now I'm gonna get myself all comfy again. I've been mostly sitting in this bed. Okay. So the prince has tied up Ella because she said she didn't want to marry him. And that's where we're off now. Let me just see how much I want to read, because I want to read until maybe 8:30, 8:40. Let's do like 8:40. Hold on. That sounds like, looks like a good amount. Well, things are gonna get very hairy from here. Very hairy. But it's gonna be really exciting. Really, really exciting. Alright, so we're on chapter 18. Wait, I didn't even pick where I wanted to leave off. Yeah, I think I know where I'm gonna leave off. If it's gonna get that hairy. Hell yeah. Yeah, I think I know where I want to leave off, but if I ever want to leave off, like, sooner, I can do that too, but I think this is the ideal. Alright, so, Chapter 18. Chapter 18. For a long time after he left, I couldn't seem to comprehend what had happened. We had fought. Prince Charming had tied me up. How could that be? I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, my mind a jumble. So much for breaking it off gently, I thought. The humor helped my mind clear, but I couldn't laugh. What would happen next? I listened for the footsteps. Hold on just a second. Gonna have to get more water after this episode, this chapter. The humor helped my mind clear, but I couldn't laugh. What would happen next? I listened for footsteps in the hall outside, but there were none. He wasn't coming back, but no one else was coming to rescue me either. Help! I tried to scream. Or, I'm like doing this so unenthusiastically. I apologize. Help! There we go. I tried to scream experimentally, but the gag was so. Oh, yeah, because she's gagged too. So it'd be like, whew, yeah, like that. Like, whew. Uh, I tried to scream experimentally, but the gag was so effective I could barely hear myself. Well, it might have been the wrong person uh, well, it might have been the wrong person who heard you anyhow, I thought. I looked down, taking stock. The ties were cutting into my wrists and ankles, and one of my knuckles was bleeding. Probably I'd scraped it, hitting the prints. But if that was my worst injury, I still had I was still capable of rescuing myself. I liked her help. I sat up and managed to push myself off the couch into a standing position. I could feel the breath. I sat up and managed to push myself off the couch into a standing position. I could feel the blood rushing from my head, and I swayed, dangerously so, considering that my ankles were tied tightly together. But I stood my ground and felt steady again in a moment. The door was almost 12 feet away, but I was certainly capable of hopping that far. I'd figured I'd figure out what to do about the latch when I got there. I bent my knees and sprang up. Once, twice. On the third hop, I landed on my ripped petticoat and went sprawling across the floor. I was struggling to get back up when the door opened. Princess! It was Madame Bassett. I winced. Oh no, I know, I muttered. Very, very unladylike. Of course, she couldn't hear me through the gag. Madame Bassett turned, and the prince and one of his advisors followed her in. I'd seen the advisor before at dinners. He was a sturdy, sensible looking fellow named Twelling, who always seemed to bring up more practical points than any of the others. I dared to have hope. Twelling and the prince scooped me off. Twelling and the prince scooped me off the floor and set me on the couch. Neither they nor Madame Bassett sat beside me, but Twelling gently removed the gag. My hands and feet are tied too, I reminded him. Twelling had the grace to look embarrassed. Yeah, it's bad. I am aware of that, he said, but we need to settle this first. I understand you and the prince had a lover's spat? His his choice of words astounded me. It was a lover's spat, I said carefully. The way the swan wore is a friendly disagreement. Hold on just 1 second. Okay. Yes, well, Twelling cleared his throat. I see that things got a little out of hand, but you are the prince's intended, and he loves you. And when you made your little threat about the wedding, well, of course he felt a little panicky. What now? Just what is it that you hope to gain? A grander dress? More of your family invited to the wedding? Different food at the banquet? I swallowed hard, struggling to be diplomatic. The prince must not have understood, I said. I'm not trying to gain anything. I want exactly what I said. I want to cancel the wedding. I don't want to marry him. I did it an hour ago, and I certainly don't now. Bargain for more political power. Hey, that's it. That's it. So much for diplomacy. But you see, Twelling bent down and actually petted my hand. What you want isn't possible. Do you understand that word? Hell yeah. Defeat the patriarchy, in with the matriarchy. I was too insulted to nod. You see, no one can call off a wedding to a prince, especially not to a charming. It just isn't done. I'm doing it, I said. You little. You little? Madame Bassett stepped forward. Twelling gave her a meaningful look. She ran her tongue over her lips. I mean, my dear princess, I don't know what prompted this, but surely you aren't in your right mind. You haven't been yourself since the tournament. Madame Bassett looked right and left, at Twelling and the prince. She fainted. Perhaps she was too embarrassed to mention it to you, your highness, but she was unable to leave her bed for the rest of the day. Only because you did everything but tie me down, I protested. If the prince had been there, maybe he could have taken care of it for you. The prince moved toward me, complaining. See, that's the kind of thing she... Twelling laid a warning hand on his arm. The prince stepped back and shut up. Twelling and Madame Bassett exchanged looks. Twelling cleared his throat yet again. I decided that could get to be a very annoying habit. Well, we do have a dilemma here, don't we? Twelling asked rhetorically. No, I said. There's an easy solution. Just let me go. Cancel the wedding, have another ball, and pick someone else to bear your precious, beautiful children. Twelling frowned. He pulled Madame Bassett and the prince to the side, and they conferred in whispers. I heard only scattered words. The humiliation. Family history of instability. But will it work? The prince didn't seem to be saying much. I remembered Mary's witticism about him. He wouldn't know how to get out of bed in the morning if he didn't have advisors telling him which foot to put on the floor first. What kind of fool had nothing to say about whether or not he was going to marry someone who'd rejected him? Shame washed over me. I had little room to make fun of him. How intelligent had I been, agreeing to marry him in the first place? Nearly after a quarter hour of whispering, Twelling strode to the door and left briefly. Madame Bassett and the prince were silent in his absence. When he returned, the three of them spoke only a few seconds before returning to my side. The prince and Twelling hung back. Obviously, Madame Bassett had been selected to speak for all of them. Princess, she said in a deceptively soothing tone, it is clear what's happened here. I waited. She cleared her throat. Was Twelling's bad habit contagious? You have been under a great deal of strain adapting to castle life, she said. Perhaps those of us teaching you have been at fault for failing to realize just what a delicate creature you are. Delicate? I'd like to see Madame Bassett try to carry 16 buckets of water it always um, I'd like to see Madame Bissette try to carry the 16 buckets of water it always took to fill Corma and Griselda's bathing tub. I'd like to see her haul 50-pound bags of potatoes home from the market without stopping once to rest. I'd like her to see her scrub and clean from dawn until midnight without no food but a bowl of porridge. I was so busy trying to think of the exact right example to prove that delicacy was not my problem that I almost missed her next words. We, your beloved prince, Sir, Sir Twelling and I, we want to ensure that you return to your former health and vigor. When you do, I am certain you'll realize the error of your ways and thank us for not indulging your foolishness. She patted my arm. Something stung my skin, and for a second I was distracted, puzzling whether I'd been pinched by her ring, or surely not a less than perfectly manicured nail. I couldn't focus on her next words. Then I couldn't focus on her face. But I did catch one last glimpse of her malicious smile before I slid into darkness. That is the end of 18, baby! Oh my god, what's gonna happen? Fucking shit just got fucking whack. Fucking whack. Well, I feel like you're not too far off. Alright. So, Chapter 19. Chapter 19. I woke feeling woozy-headed, stiff, cold, and sore. I had a moment of wondering if I'd merely had a strange dream about living in a castle. I always woke up stiff and cold and sore back home. But then I opened my eyes and saw the uneven stone of the castle instead of the plaster walls of home. No, the dream was true, only it had become a nightmare. I sat up slowly, fighting waves of dizziness. When I finally reached an upright position, I leaned my head against the wall behind me and surveyed my surroundings. I was alone, but I was not in my usual room. This place was nothing but stone walls, dirt floor, and the narrow wooden bench I'd been lying on. The only window was high above over my head. It held no glass to keep out the chill, only a crisscross of bars. The heavy wooden door across of me was barred and lined with heavy rods of iron. Though I'd never been here before, I knew where I was. The dungeon. I blinked several times, as if hoping the view would change if I only looked again. I don't understand, I murmured. Why am I here? I thought back over everything that had happened, wondering if I'd missed one important clue. The prince had pushed me around and tied me up, certainly, but I didn't take him for a sadist. Just a dullard who'd never been told no before. As for Twelling and Madame Bissette, they were diabolical, but not crazy. How is this supposed to make me love the prince? I asked out loud. I raised my head weakly, as though I could look out the prison bars for an answer. But that effort was a little too much for me, and my head clunked back against the wall. Pain shot through my whole body, and tears sprang into my eyes, and suddenly I understood. They didn't care about me making me love the prince. They just wanted to break my spirit. I drew my legs in and huddled on the bench, weeping silently. When I had to, I wiped my nose on my sleeve, because there was nothing else. What a fool I'd been. What had I expected the prince to say? Oh, that's okay. That's okay, Elle. I understand. You go on with your life, and I'll go on with mine. No hard feelings. That could also be a thing. Yeah, not it's not about loving the prince. It's about hating and not loving him. Ah, yeah, that's another way to go about it. Hmm. I knew better than that. Hadn't I seen love affairs go sour in the village? When the wife of Roston, the pig tender, got mad at him, she burned every one of his leather vests and cursed him by sticking pins in a dozen pigs' eyes. For all their prissy manners and French accents, the people in the castle were no better than the pig tender's wife, just better dressed and more powerful. I shivered. Yeah, you heard that right. Yes. Kill the world. Yep, kill the world. Yeah. And more powerful. I shivered, remembering something I'd read in a book of my father's. Hold on. Actually, I forgot to get water, so I'm gonna do that now. I am back. Thank you for waiting for me. Okay, there we go. Now I gotta get all cozy again. Let me drink some more water too. I need to start drinking more water. Alright. I shivered. Yeah, I shivered. Remembering something I'd read in a book of my father's long ago. It was about a king in another land and another time who'd had his wives beheaded when he'd lost interest in them. Why hadn't I remembered that sooner? Had I gotten a had I gotten too accustomed to having people fawn over me? Oh, princess, you're so beautiful. Oh, princess, your hair curls so perfectly. Oh, princess, you make the loveliest bride. Had I actually believed all that? Could I think of a single person in the whole castle who truly liked me? He wasn't just kissing up because they thought I would someday be queen? Yes, I could. I could even think of two, Mary and Jed. I felt the first stirring of hope, but it died quickly. Okay, so not everybody hated me, but so what? What could Mary or Jed do? Mary was just a servant girl, and Jed. I swallowed hard, focusing myself to evaluate Jed as harshly I've as I'd ever I forcing myself to evaluate Jed as harshly as I'd evaluated myself. Oh, just most. Yeah, not everyone hates me. Just most people hate me. All right. Um, 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 um. Okay. Uh, yeah. Mary was just a servant girl, and Jed? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to evaluate Jed as harshly as I had evaluated myself. Jed wasn't a doer. He was a thinker, someone who cared about ideas and cared about doing right, but spent all his time pondering concepts like good and evil instead of taking action. If I'd been him, caring as passionately as he did about the Swan War victims, I would have found some ways to help them. But Jed just sat and waited, wrinkling his hands and bemoaning the palace indifference. He wouldn't be able to help me either. Hold on just a second. There we go. I buried my face in my hands, not able to bear looking at the dungeon around me and think a second longer. Why hadn't I just run away when I'd had the chance? If I'd been so concerned about not hurting the prince, I could have left a note. Princess? It was Madame Bassett. I evaluated my chances based on her one word. If she was still calling me princess, it was a good sign. They must still have hopes that I would consent to marry the prince, or that I could be forced to. They weren't going to kill me. I deliberately did not raise my head. If Madame Bassett thought I was still unconscious, perhaps I could overpower her when she came into my cell. She was taller and heavier than me, but she led a soft life in the palace, and I still had some muscles left over from all those years of carrying cinders. Madame Bassett didn't open the door. Princess, I know you're awake. There's no use pretending, she said from the other side of the bars. Just listen. Her words were blunter and rougher than I'd heard from her before. Perhaps even she realized how ridiculous her fakey, Frenchified, decorous talk would sound in the dungeon. You're going to stay here until you realize you have only one choice, she said, and then you'll marry the prince. I raised my head and yelled as forcefully as I could, Never! I'd intended to keep giving her the silent treatment which had always been so effective at infuriating Lucille, but really, defiance was much more my style. Madame Bassett wasn't phased. Oh, yes, we'll keep you in the dungeon until wedding day if necessary. I laughed to show her that she didn't scare me, but it was hard keeping my laughter from sliding into hysteria. Sure, I said sarcastically. Prison pallor will look great with that beautiful gown. Madame Bassett smiled. You look radiant, she said, almost reverently. So thin, so pale. She was right, I thought. They really they really did want me to look as if I'd spent my life in prison. Maybe that was how I'd won the prince in the first place. Because I was so pale from staying in the house all day, being Lucille's slave. So thin from never getting enough to eat. If it didn't affect me, I could feel plenty amused by the palace ideal of female beauty. But it did affect me. It was the reason I was in the dungeon. Fine. I'm stuck here. I guess someone will bring me something to eat every once in a while, I said wildly. I guess the only other thing I need now is, where do I pee? I meant to shock her, using some common term for a bodily function that was too base to mention even with a euphemism. But Madame Bassett didn't flinch. There's a hole in the corner, she said. You may squat. She pointed to the bars, and for the first time I saw the dark depression beyond the other end of my bench. I peered over at it until the smell overwhelmed me. Obviously, I wasn't the first prisoner who'd been held in this cell. Evidently, the Charmings weren't as charming as they'd like their subjects to believe. Look at me, I said. I have all the amenities. Amenities, yeah. I have all the amenities. Madame Bassett sniffed. You, she said, are a fool. Don't you know what you're throwing away? Maybe you think I'm like everyone else, castle-born and castle-bred. You've had no reason to think otherwise. But no, I'm like you. I was not born to nobility. I had to fight for everything I've gotten. I had to work. And I don't have a single regret about anything I had to do. I regarded Madame Bassett for the first time as a potentially interesting person. What exactly had she had to do? Somehow, I didn't think she would tell me. What is wrong with you? She ranted. You know what it's like to be a commoner. They live in manure. They are manure. Why would you want to go back to that? I just want to be free. I just want to be free, I whispered. Free? Madame Bassett practically spat out the word. What's that? There's no such thing. Everything has a price, and I'm not paying the price for you. I'm not going to have everything I've worked for taken away by a ninny like you. I squinted, puzzled. Did she mean that her fate was somehow tied up with mine? Would she be blamed if I didn't shape up, marry the prince, and act like a proper princess? I didn't know what to think about those possibilities. I will come and see you every day, Madame Bassett said, a little more calmly. And when you are ready, I will tell the guards to release you. Until then. She thrust a bowl through the bars and waited until I stumbled across the floor to take it. It was filled with a thin gruel. I thought at first that there were small chunks of meat floating on the surface. But they turned out to be weevils. Weevils. I don't know what that is, so I'm gonna. Weevils. Oh, they're insects. It's a small beetle. Weevils lay eggs inside of food. And then when they're, yeah. That's what she's getting. Yeah, it was filled with a thin gruel. I thought at first there were small chunks of meat floating on the surface, but they turned out to be weevils. Madame Bassett was watching my reaction, so I was careful to keep my face expressionless. Good day, Madame Bassett said as she turned to leave. Good day to you as well, I said stiffly. I watched through the bars until she was out of sight. I sat down and ate the gruel. I forced myself not to gag on the weevils. You can go ask Lucille, I whispered though Madame Bassett was long gone. It takes more than this to break me. I hoped. And that is the end of 19. Oh my god. Bro, what's gonna happen? I don't know what's gonna happen, bro. Actually, yeah, I do know what's gonna happen. She's gonna fucking die. Now, do you think this would be that type of book? No, I believe this would be that type of book. Though it is a book for young adults, or I think, where was it? It's ages 11 to 14. So no, I don't think they'd kill her off, which she does not die. Okay. Okay. So, but they could. Yeah, they always could. All right. Chapter 20. I had fallen into a fitful sleep on the bench that night when I heard the scratching at my door. Mice, I thought, or rats. It figures. But then there was a whisper. Princess? Are you in there? Gratefully, I sprung to the door. Mary, is that you? I. I followed Madame Bassett to find you, and I couldn't believe. Why are you here? Take your pick of reasons. Either I'm testing the effect of cold, clammy dungeons on princesses' complexions, or I told the prince I didn't want to marry him. Mary gasped, unaffected by my attempt at humor. You didn't, she said. Didn't you know? I mean, why didn't you tell me you were going to do that? I could have. I mean. Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it, I said glumly. You could have told me it'd land me here. So I'd been fooled too for not confiding in anyone. Mary and Jed both would have told me the right way to break up with the prince. Run like crazy. Well, there was still time for that. Mary, can you find Jed and and get him to help me? Maybe you two can figure out some way to smuggle me out of here. Or maybe he can talk to the prince and everyone and convince them to set me free. He'll know. He'll know the best thing to do. There was a long silence on the other side of the door. Then Mary spoke hesitantly. Princess, Master Reston is gone. For a moment, I feared that Jen had been punished somehow because of what I'd done. Surely no one realized that I was closer to him than any of my other instructors. Did they? Mary went on. He left for this wall in front today. I listened at a couple of doors. Something about helping some folks who used to live there where the battlefields are now. He had to leave in a big hurry. So they'd given him his dearest wish. Somehow I had to think that it was connected to me. Did they realize that he at least wouldn't advise the prince to keep me Did they realize that he at least wouldn't advise the prince to keep me locked in a dungeon? I felt a little hurt that he hadn't tried to see me to say goodbye. He'd gotten what he'd wanted, thanks to me. I guess that was all he cared about. But I can try and help you. Mary said in a quavery voice. Her words echoed a little off the stones. In the dark, unable to see her face, I somehow understood the depths of her loyalty as I had it before. As I had it before. She was taking enormous risks, just coming to see me. I didn't feel worthy of her devotion. I tried to think of a gentle way to tell her that there was nothing she could do for me. Mary, I appreciate your offer, believe me, I said, but your fairy godmother's coming to get you. But your fairy... let me say that again. But your fairy godmother's coming to get you? I said that wrong again. It's supposed to be a question. Gosh darn it. But your fairy godmother's coming to get you, she asked eagerly. I bit my lip to hold back a sarcastic retort. Wouldn't the old lady have shown up before now if she existed? Mary, I don't have a fairy godmother, I said. All those stories you heard were just made up. Then how did you get to be a princess? Mary asked, puzzled. It was all my own foolishness, I said. My own fault. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Mary trying to understand my magicless life. Me feeling torn between wanting to send her away for her own good and wanting to stall her some more so that at least I wouldn't be left all so that at least I wouldn't be left alone again. I kicked idly at a pebble on the ground. It skittered across the floor and landed with a plop, far down in the hole I'd been using in the lieu of the chamber pot. I gasped, suddenly struck an idea. Mary, I said urgently, how close is the dungeon to the castle walls? I heard the rustle of her shrugging. A couple of feet, give or take, she said. Are you thinking of climbing out? You couldn't fit through the bars. No, I said impatiently. I want to dig. Could you get me a shovel? Some from the stable, maybe. From the stable? Even in a whisper, her voice carried a full load of puzzlement. I guess. Good, I said. Then do it, please. Someone will see you where you've dug, she protested. You can't see the whole way in one night. You can't dig the whole way in one night, and then come day. They won't see, I said. I'm going to dig my way out through the crap hole. And that is the end of chapter 20. It's beginning to seem a lot like what's that one's Shawshank Redemption. Have you seen that movie, Chandler? It's a good movie. I'm gonna just adjust myself. Yeah, it is. That's basically what she's gonna try and do. Okay. But yeah, that was the end of chapter 20, and now on to 21. We're making good progress here. I'm kind of almost where I want to stop, sort of. I got 20 more pages, or less than 20 pages. Anyway, We're good. We're good. Alright, chapter 21. Mary wasted a lot of time protesting that, as a princess, I couldn't go near a spot that anyone had performed bodily eliminations. I tried to explain how many chamber pots I had carried out and cleaned for Cormund and Griselda and Lucille, but Mary was still too stunned by my lack of a fairy godmother to absorb what I was saying. All the same, she was an obedient soul, and by the time the palace clock rang midnight, the fateful hour once said, let me say that again. All the same, she was an obedient girl. All the same, she was an obedient soul, and by the time the palace clock rang midnight, the fateful hour once again, she had left and returned with a heavy shovel. Even with the smell of the crap hole, I still recoiled from the odor of the shovel as Mary handled it through the barred window of the door. I knew the dried mud I knocked off the handle had to be manure. I reminded myself that this was no time for all that delicacy training to kick in. It's stolen, Mary said hesitantly. I took her meaning. I'll hide it by daylight, I promised. I won't get you in trouble. I wish I could do the digging for you, she said wistfully. So do I joked. Mary didn't laugh. But it's fitting. I've got myself into this mess, and I've got to get myself out. Now, I'd love the company, but it's not safe for you here to. It's not safe for you to stay. And don't you need to sleep? She murmured. I'll come back when I can. As soon as I'd sent Mary away, I took a deep breath of relatively fresh air and lowered myself into the hole. I'd left the shovel on the dirt floor until I was down several feet. My knees braced against the sides of the hole. The stench was overwhelming. At first I held my breath, but I started feeling lightheaded, even as I reached up for the shovel. That wouldn't do. I gave up and inhaled deeply. After a few moments, when I figured I had to become one with the smell, it stopped bothering me. Awkwardly, I pulled the shovel down into the hole with me. The trick wouldn't be to dig far down enough to the side of the hole that was the floor. The trick would be to dig far down enough on the side of the hole that the floor wouldn't collapse on my tunnel, but not so low that I'd lose a lot of time digging to the surface once I'd reached the other side of the castle walls. I picked a spot about 3 feet down and poked the tip of the shovel into the packed earth. Hold on, even I need to read this again because I'm just getting lost. Hold on. Okay. So I'm going to read it again just so I can actually process and understand it. The trick would be to dig far down enough on the side of the hole that the floor wouldn't collapse on my tunnel, but not so low that I'd lose a lot of time digging up to the surface once I'd reached the other side of the castle walls. I picked a spot about 3 feet down and poked the tip of the shovel into the packed earth. The shovel's handle was too long to fit straight across the hole. So I had to hold it in an awkward position. Pushing with all my might, I managed to dislodge two pebbles and a sprinkling of dust. That wouldn't do. I tried every angle poss I tried every other angle possible, even shimmying up the hole and bending over with the shovel below my feet. But all I accomplished was to give myself severe back cramps. I climbed out of the hole to recover and think. Me and my bright ideas. I heard the clock struck. I heard the clock strike one, and I wondered if I might be better served by trying to get a good night's sleep, so I'd have my wits about me when I saw Madame Bissette the next day. Could I somehow make her an ally? Talk her into helping me escape? In the dark, in the dark, I pictured her face, the prim set of the prim set of her lips, the upward tilt of her nose, the coldness of her eyes. No, she'd never be on my side. I'd do better pretending in the cave, just so they'd let me out of the dungeon. Yeah, I'd do better. Yeah, I'd do better pretending to Oh, I read it wrong. Or did I? No. I'd do better pretending to cave in just so they let me out of the castle. And then I could escape, once they no longer watched me so carefully. Except, they'd probably never stop watching me so carefully. I try to imagine the rest of my life, always under guard. Hold on. There we go. I need to put some lip balm on. Except they'd probably never stop watching me so carefully. I tried to imagine the rest of my life, always under guard, like a bird in a gilded cage. I couldn't live like that. I couldn't even pretend to want to live like that. The shovel was my only hope. If only the handle weren't so long. With the speed of tinder catching fire, I realized my stupidity. Okay, Ella, the handle's too long, so break it. I slammed it against my knee, and it split into two with a satisfying clunk. I climbed back into the hole, wondering how stupid I would have become if I'd stayed a princess much longer. Maybe that was the problem with everyone in the castle. Their lives were so soft and dull, they never had to think. Maybe under different circumstances, Prince Charming would be designing buildings, writing books, speaking 17 different languages. Maybe even my most vapid, vapid lady in waiting, Cipriana, was secretly capable of great genius. That was such a laughable thought that I had extra energy thrusting the shovel back into the wall of the hole. This time I got out 4 pebbles and a clod of dirt the size of an apple. At least this was an improvement. I worked steadily the rest of the night, stopping to rest only once an hour. When I heard the palace clock chime, I told myself my goal I told myself my goal that first night was only to make a big enough tunnel to hide the shovel in. But I reached that milestone at 3 o'clock and mustered up the will to keep going. Madame Bissette had threatened to keep me in the dungeon until the wedding date, which was now just 2 weeks away. I was confident in my ability to dig myself out before that. And what if her threat was just a threat? What if they took pity on me and moved me back to my usual room after a few days? That certainly had nicer accommodations, but it was still a prison, and I didn't know how to escape from there. As daybreak approached, I began to fear that a guard or Madame Bassett might show up to check on. Uh, as daybreak approached, I began to fear that a guard or Madame Bassett had might show up to check on me in the early morn. When I heard the 5 o'clock chiming, I pushed my shovel as far back into my tunnel as it would go, and carefully climbed out of the hole for the day. My arms and shoulders ached, and my legs had long ago gone numb. I barely managed to stumble over the plank bed. I believe I was still asleep until the final dong of 5. Hold on. Yeah, yeah. I barely managed to stumble over to the plank bed. I believe I was asleep before the final dong of 5. And that's the end of chapter 21. Alright. Okay. I'm like, can you still hear me? Yeah, you can still hear me, but I'm just gonna do this instead. I'm gonna do that. Alright. Yeah, I'm like 10 pages away from being actually done for today. So I think I can get this done before 8. No, probably 8:40 is gonna be the time. Anyways. Chapter 22. Yeah, chapter 22. My cell was still dim when Madame Bassette's voice woke me. So, sloth is among the faults we must cure in you, she jeered. Are you worth the effort? Sleep startled, I was at a loss for dealing with this new coarsened Madame Bassett. I held my tongue but sat up dizzily. My head ached, and once I began to move, so did every muscle in my body. What what time is it? What time is it? I asked. High noon, she all but cackled. Why don't you see the lovely shunts? Don't you see the lovely sunshine coming in the window? I refrained from pointing out what. Uh, I refrained from pointing out whatever. What. What the heck? I cannot fucking read right now. I refrained from pointing out that whatever lovely sunshine there might be outdoors would never venture into the dungeon or anyone else in the castle, or anywhere else in the castle for that matter. Did you get enough beauty rest? She continued. I decided an attempt at dignity would serve me well today. I didn't have enough energy for defiance. Yes, thank you, I said. I heard slow, pounding footsteps coming down the hallway behind her. They put me in mind. In mind of hideous fairy tale giants, the kind that chant that chant fee, fi, fo, fum, and brag about smelling blood. The man who appeared outside my barred window fit the image. He towered over Madame Bassett by at least 1.5 feet. His clothes were filthy and torn. His hair and beard were a mass of tangles, and his leer was the most lecherous I'd seen. Leer? What's leer? Hold on, I'm gonna figure this out too. Not lure, leer. Oh. Okay, a look or gaze in an implicit, malicious, or lascivious way. Okay. I got it. Yeah, and his lair was the most lecherous I'd ever seen. For the first time, I was glad of the heavy door of my cell. Yeah, for the first. Jesus, I cannot speak. For the first time, I was glad of the heavy door of my cell. If I may introduce you to your jailer, Madame Bassett said in her perfect accent and primness. Her perfect accent and primness returned. I didn't miss the point. She considered this brute more worthy of her manners than I was. Princess Cynthiana Eleonora, this is Kwong, Princess Cynthiana Eleonora. Kwong drooled. Huh, he rumbled. Pleased to meet you. Pleased to meet you, I said, determined to match Madame Bassett in this pretense. Kwong has been instructed to take very good care of you until the wedding, Madame Bassett said. And after? I said boldly. Madame Bassett raised one eyebrow. If there is an after, if you prove to be unreformable and are still here, then Kwong has been told your fate is entirely in his hands. He may do as he wishes. I wished I hadn't asked. Huh. Huh. Kwong said again. Huh. He panted like a dog begging for a treat. I want, he grunted. That. He pointed at me. You're trying to scare me, I said to Madame Bassett. It won't work. But against my will, an edge of fear crept into my voice. Madame Bassett only smiled at me. Not now, she told Quag. For today, just give her her gruel. He slid a bowl through the space in the bars. Reluctantly, I stepped forward and tried to take it from him. But as soon as I was in reach, he grabbed my hand. His skin was leathery but strangely moist. I struggled to pull away, but he was too strong for me. No, Madame Bassett said forcefully. Not today, Kwong. You must let go. Kwong looked from me to her. He moaned like a scolded dog. Aww. But he dropped my hand. My bowl of gruel turned upside down on the floor. Too bad, Madame Bassett said. That was your only meal today. At the moment, I didn't care. I wrapped my hand where Kwong had touched me. I longed to scrub it. He was that disgusting. Kwong, here you are dismissed, Madame Bassett said. When he had lurched away, she leaned close and said, Kwong doesn't have a key to your cell. Yet. I made myself stop rubbing my hand. Maybe, I gulped. Maybe it's just his appearance that's revolting. Maybe he's truly a very good person. Madame Bassett laughed as if I'd told the world's funniest joke. No, she said cheerfully. He's revolting through and through. Now I must be going. Will you return with me? Return to what? I asked cautiously. Your rightful place, she said. I believe the dressmaker would like you to try on your wedding gown again. Then I'll stay right here, I said. I hope you enjoyed Kwang's company, she said lightly, and turned and left. Her departure must have been Kwang's cue. The rest of the day, he lingered outside my cell, alternating his and I wants and I wants. Once, I decided to test my theory. Hold on just a second. Okay. No. Okay. Okay. Just need to get something. Okay, there we go. No, you got the goddamn. There we go. That's what I wanted. Yeah, I need to charge my thing. There we go. There we go. Once, I decided to try to test my theory. Kwang, I asked, did you have a happy childhood? No. No. Yeah, he said. Wanted woman. Couldn't get them. Now big. Get what want. Hit. I lay down on my plank and closed my eyes, deciding to ignore him. The next few days, I did my best to sleep all day to have energy to work all night. I feel like he might want to do both. But that's like my theory. I know, it's disgusting. Yeah, it doesn't get into this book doesn't get into like actual rape. At least I don't remember. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But like this is like I think the closest she'll ever get, I guess, to like being in a really risky sort of situation. But I don't think there's any rape in this book because it's only for ages 11 to 14, and I don't think those ages could comprehend that sort of thing. Well, maybe they could. Anyways. The next few days I did my excuse me. The next few days, I did my best to sleep all day, to have energy to work all night. Each shovelful of dirt I removed and dropped down the crap hole carried Kwang's face on it for me. I worked hard like a madwoman, without breaks. I tried to calculate how many more he-he's I'd have to endure. I tried to figure out what I'd do once I escaped. But my mind was too hazy from lack of food to think at all. The spilled gruel scene was repeated each day, along with Madame Basset's fake "too bad." I feared I feared I might soon consent to Madame Basset's "Would you like to return with me?" only out of starvation and delirium. I thought I had been hungry before, but I've never gone entirely without food. On the third day, as soon as Madame Basset was gone, I rushed to lick I rushed to lick the floor where the gruel had fallen. I believe I managed to lap up only 3 flakes of meal and 2 weevils, but the sight of me on my knees sent Kwong into howls of excitement. "If you want me alive for the next 2 weeks," I said crossly, "you'll bring me more gruel." Kwong only howled louder. Digging that night, I had to pause between each shovel load. I tried to remember if any of my father's books had contained information about how long someone could live without food. Surely it wasn't many days. Surely Madame Basset would not truly let me starve. "Princess? Princess?" With renewed energy, I scrambled out of the hole. "Mary? I brought you some food," she whispered. "I thought with all that digging—" Tears of relief blurred my eyes. "You have saved my life," I blubbered. "I can't thank you enough. I can't—" I couldn't talk anymore, for cramming bread and uh, for cramming bread and cheese into my mouth. "Don't they feed you?" Mary asked. "No," I said. She was silent, as if attempting to grasp their strategy. "They think you'll cave soon," she said finally. I didn't care about anything but the food in my mouth. "Is there more?" I asked. She laughed. "Cook's off tonight. I can get lots. Have you dug enough of the hole that you can hide a big bundle?" "Oh, yes." She brought what looked like a treasure trove, from plums and pears to apples, an entire wheel of cheese, and 3 loaves of bread. I was crying with joy as she handed each food through my bars. "Don't go on like that, please," she begged. "It's only plain stuff. I thought the fancy things might be missed. You don't understand. Weevils were starting to taste good to me. And then there's Kwong. Is he here?" Mary asked. Her voice trembled. "Yes," I said. "He's my jailer. Lovely gentleman, isn't he?" "Then you should dig fast." "Then you should dig fast." "I don't want to scare you." I... Hold on. I, lost who was talking and who was not. Uh... I'll go to... "Is he here? Is he here?" Mary asked. Her voice trembled. "Yes," I said. He's my jailer. Lovely gentleman, isn't he?" "Then you should dig fast." I couldn't get her to explain more. I don't want to scare you," she said. "But you already have," I muttered. "Sorry," she said. "I should go. I'll try to come back the next time Cook's off." I started to protest, wanting company now that my belly would let me think of something besides food. But her words, "You should dig fast," were still echoing in my ears. I went back into the crap hole and dug as much as I'd dug the previous 2 nights. I went back to the crap hole and dug as much as I had dug the previous 2 nights put together. And that's the end of chapter 22. Ooh boy, what's gonna happen? Alright, last chapter of the night. Oh shit. Oh my god, I'm reading ahead and I'm just like, oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, this is the last chapter because it's gonna be a woozy. You're gonna be like, I did not see that coming at all. Read! I wanna know! Oh boy! Or maybe I should do this tomorrow. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. No, I was already planning on reading it. But goddamn. You were typing something. Or maybe you stopped typing it? Oh, I see, I see. Alright, yes. On we go to chapter 23. Chapter 23. By the end of the fifth night, I was ready to curve my tunnel upward. I estimated it would take me only an hour or two from there, because I'd be helped by gravity bringing the dirt down. Would I dare break through the surface and escape at 5 in the morning? Reluctantly, I decided it was too much risk. I wanted to put an entire night's travel between me and the castle before my disappearance was discovered. I put my shovel down and crawled back to my cell. The next The next day was an agony. To be so close to freedom, but not to have it, made uh, to be so close to freedom, but not to have it, made Kwang's disgusting leers and taunts even more unendurable. When Madame Bassett showed up for the noon gruel routine, I had to struggle not to laugh in her face. You've had 5 days of torture, I told myself. You can't act like you have any hope. Have you come to your senses yet? She asked. I still have senses about me, I retorted. But can't you feed me? Immediately, I realized my voice was too strong and self-assured. Please, I made myself whimper. I'm starving. I sucked in my cheeks, although I thought the cell was too dark for her to notice that I wasn't as emaciated as I would be after 5 days without food. Madame Bassett looked puzzled. Kwang hasn't been bringing you extra food, has he? She asked. Her eyes narrowed. I pretended to misunderstand. Oh, would he do that? That would be so wonderful. It doesn't have to be much. Just a crust of bread. I won't get too fat, I promise. But I have to eat something. Oh, all I think about is food. Here's your gruel, then, Madame Bisset said. This time, Madame Bisset herself passed the bowl through the bars. I made myself grab it as clumsily, feigning eagerness, feigning an eagerness only a starving person would have for that lukewarm, weevil-studded mess. My acting was too effective. This time, I was the one who spilled it all over the floor. I immediately fell to my knees and pretended to look it up, right there in front of Madame Bisset. I faked ecstasy at the taste of food. Isn't there more? Please. You are disgusting, Madame Bisset snapped. But she finally sounded satisfied. 2 hours later, I discovered my pretense had worked too well. The prince showed up. Oh, Ella, he declared with what was possibly supposed to be a horrified tone, but only came out sounding wooden. Is this where you've been? I didn't know. Oh, my beloved. I decided the supposed Prince of Charm was in desperate need of acting classes. But how in the world was I supposed to respond? Prince, I said tentatively, buying time. It's those advisors of mine, he said. I think he may have been reading his words off a slip of paper in his hand. They were angry at you, but I couldn't think of anything but you. I've searched the whole castle for you. I love you. I've missed you. I stifled the urge to tell him I'd seen children display more genuine emotion over pet fleas they've killed 5 minutes later. It probably wasn't in my best interest to speak of killing. You know, you are the prince. All you had to do was threaten to get rid of your advisors if they wouldn't tell you where I was, I said, flirting with insubordination in spite of myself. The prince blinked. I don't think that line was in a script. I've come to rescue you, he said uncertainly. Oh no, I couldn't leave the dungeon now. Come with me, the prince added. He raised a key to my door. Aw, shit. Thinking fast, I threw myself at the prince's feet, or as near as I could, with the dungeon door between us. But sire, I wailed, I wronged you. I deserve to stay here an entire week to do penance for my sin. I think penance was too complicated a word for the prince. After all, it does have 2 syllables. He stood there looking confused. Return for me in 2 days, I begged him. Then I can go with you, a pure woman, worthy of your love. I practically choked on the words, but hey, my acting was no more appalling than the prince's. Well, the prince started doubtfully. Down the hall I heard a growl. Who's there? Who's there? Huang bellowed. She's mine! In the flickers of the lamplight, I saw the prince draw his sword. Begone, he warned. Huang stomped closer. Mine, he repeated. The prince ran his sword through Huang's chest. Oh! Huang groaned. He fell heavily to the ground, and then he was silent. The prince looked back at me, blood on his hands. I slew that creature for love of you, he mumbled. Right? Wow, that was the wow part. He really, yes, he did. I slew that creature for love of you, he mumbled. I shrank back against the wall of my cell, weeping. I had no affection for Kwong, of course, but what I had witnessed still horrified me. It was all so cold and heartless and without reason. Did the prince, or more likely, his advisors, think I would be won over by watching him murder Kwong? Did they think me so poorly? What kind of people had I been living with? I'll kill thousands more for you. Yeah, exactly. Darling, the prince said. I sobbed harder. Now, I could barely speak. Now I am truly unworthy. Return, return in 3 days. Oh, all right, the prince said, seeming suddenly impatient with the whole charade. Bye. He turned to go, kicking Kwong's body aside without a second glance. I watched the circle of his lamplight recede down the hall within him. Not within him. I watched the circle of his lamplight recede down the hall with him. Even that dim glow picked up the glint of gold in his hair. I now knew the real Prince Charming to be, at best, an insensitive dullard, or perhaps even a callous monster, only barely better than Kwong himself. But I still felt a pang for the ideal I thought I'd lived, the perfect male I'd made up in my mind, with the image of the prince's face. I lay down on my plank bed and tried to forget what I'd seen. In 3 hours, I would begin to dig, and then I could leave everything behind. And that is the end of chapter 23. Ooh, baby, what's gonna happen? Ooh, baby. Alright. Thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.